This is the complex raglan sweater knit along. Here are a few diagrams to show you how to sew them together. Your method of sewing is up to you. Okay, this is actually the side that was facing you the entire time. You can see how fancy the pattern is. So this is actually going to be the good side, not the bad side. I am going to use my linker. It is what works best for me, but you can hand sew this or use a sewing machine with a walking foot. This is your result from just sewing the 3 seams that I've asked you to sew. Okay, so we're going to talk about the collar. We're going to do the collar in 2 sections. But they're not going to be the way you kind of think. If you watch Diana Sullivan's Mitered Collar, she has you hang the center of the front on 0, and then she moves it back and forth to make the miter. Well, it's gonna take the whole board to do that, and I don't like working in large sections. So what I'm going to do, and this is what I do a lot, is I break up the collar into 2 sections. So yes, I'm going to have 2 seams, but I will place the center of the collar on 0, so here is 0, and then only 45 more stitches, which will take me right to the end. And I'm going to only move the short end inward every 2 rows and then outward every 2 rows, folded over. It is important that you mark the center seam of your front with a contrasting color, even though we already have this piece of yarn here from when we did the other side. Having that contrast yarn is very important. What makes my collar different than Diana Sullivan's is that I like to make my collar on its own and then add it to the garment after. Yes, it may seem like a lot of extra work, but I don't like hand seaming as much as I can avoid it. So I will start with waste yarn and a cast on comb. I'll knit a few rows of waste yarn, and then I will E-wrap my working yarn to make the mitered collar. This is one of the few times you will see me use a cast on comb without the little cheater hooks on it. I'm going to put it straight up, push it in as far as I can go. Knit across. Lower it down, add some weight. Unlike a lot of the times I work with waste yarn and the cast on comb, I am not going to bring out these needles just yet. I'm going to knit another row. I'm going to reduce my tension to tension 6 so that I do not forget when it's time to switch yarns to have that ready to go. Okay, that's looking pretty good. One more row. Okay, I'm going to bring those needles forward. Ten rows. Okay, so set your row counter to 0, 0, 0. Mark the 0 right there. Mark that 0 with another piece of contrast yarn so you can keep an eye on it. So 0. We are going to pick left one as our contrast. I don't know why I did it that way. I'm just going to place a yarn marker on it. Okay, yarn marker is on. Going to pull it out. Going to knit one more row. We will now keep an eye on this yarn. We will bring in needles onto it and then off of it as we knit along. I am not going to bore you with the E-wrap cast on. It's a long process, but it's worth it. Here we go. So, E-wrapping. And we're E-wrapping just in case we drop one, we don't actually lose it. Because that would really suck with all the work we're doing. Okay. Holding that, pulling that, load it into our carriage. Put some weight on it. Okay, so now we have to pull down on our cast on comb and push these all forward. As you can see, we would have had an issue because that yarn decided to go around the gate peg. This is kind of like a little bit of security here. That is our yarn marker. We are going to start our decreases every second row, starting as soon as the carriage is on the right hand side and every time the carriage is on the right hand side. Okay, so this is our yarn marker. I'm going to try moving a little bit closer. Okay, moving in a little bit closer. Yarn marker is on one right. We're going to move one left onto one right. And number 2 right onto one right. And then we're going to move them all over to one left. And we're going to continue to move to the left every 2 rows. Now we have these 2 spaces. We're going to fill them in by moving all of the needles over 2 spaces. All the way across the board. It's a long process and I'll be back. Okay, they are all moved over. Now we will knit 2 rows and repeat the process. This time you will see that our stitch that we're going to pile onto is now over. So onto that one. onto that one, which is now left 1, goes to left 2, pull it up, and then transfer. 1, 2. And transfer. 1, 2. I'll come back when it's all done. Okay, knit across 2 rows. Find our stitch, follow it up, over, over, and everybody over. One, 2, and we do this for a total of 10 rows. So I'm going to get those done off camera, and then we'll come back to the turnaround row and the next set of instructions. Okay, so this is the final decrease. We're putting left 5 onto left 4, left 3 onto left 4, and left 4 now turns into left 5. We're now moving everything over, just like always. We have now done 5 decreases, and we are actually at row 10. And we get to be row 10 because our E-wrap cast on row counted as row 1. That is why I had you reset your row counter to 000 before we knit that last row of waste yarn. If you have done everything right, you should be on left 5 and right 35 for your transferred rows. You are also still on row 10. We're going to knit across 1 row at tension 6 and then 1 row at tension 8. The tension 8 row is a turnaround row. When we get back to the right hand side of the knitting machine, we will start increasing. Lower our tension back down to 6. And now we will start moving all of these stitches, 2 stitches, that way until we get back to 45 right. Okay. So now we are moving these stitches over. Okay. Now, as you remember, number 5 left was our triple. So now we're only going to move that one stitch. And now we're going to fill in using the ladder instead of the purl stitch from underneath. That is one of the few differences in my mitered as opposed to Diana Sullivan's mitered. We are now going to knit 2 rows, tension 6, and then we'll come back and do it again. One, 2. Come back when it's all done. Here we are closer. Okay. Now we're tracing up that line. We are here. Okay, moving these ones too. Tracing that line again. Moving this one 2. This one 1. Picking up the ladder. Knitting 2. Rinse and repeat. I will come back when I'm closer to the center again. Okay, we are close again. Follow up the line. It's right there. Single goes over 2. This one moves over 1. Fill in the space with the ladders. Knit 2. And repeat. Okay. Here. Ladder. Ladder. Knit 2. This is going to be our last increase, and then we will do a pickup of all of the E-wrap and put it on the needles for a fold over. Okay, over 2, over 1, pick up the ladders, okay. So before we do the pickup and put on the needles, we're going to knit 1 row to lock everything in. All right, now we're at a scary part where we're going to pick this up and put it on every single needle. This is going to take a little while. I'm going to turn off the video for most of it, but you will get the idea as to how this is supposed to work. I'm going to take my weights off, my cast on comb, and I'm going to transfer them to the blue yarn so that I don't lose any needles or any yarn loops so they don't jump off the needles. I'm also going to use a little piece of rebar for the fold over. Okay, so if you've never thought of using something from the garage in your knitting, you're missing out. You can see that that little piece of rebar, holds it all in so that I can deal with the loops. It's not a lot of weight to it, but it really, really helps me keep everything balanced. Okay, so I'm going to start with the end over here. This end right here I'm going to start with, and I'll come back when I'm closer to the middle. I'm just grabbing the ladders and hanging them on every single one. Okay. You can see how that bar has really held it in the right position, so I haven't had to struggle a lot. The bars are really cheap, things like $1. I'm just hanging each bar onto a needle. One by one. If you want to use your double transfer tool, then it goes twice as fast. If you want to use your triple transfer tool, then it'll go 3 times as fast. If you happen to own a 7 transfer tool, well, then it goes 7 times as fast. But you run the risk of missing. Okay, so these last ones, grab it. You're ready on that one. You need to do this one. And then you need to find this one. And there you go. Pull them all forward. Now you have the option of knitting across 2 or knitting across just 1. I kind of like the look of knitting across twice, but I don't know. Let's see what 1 looks like, and then we'll decide if we need 2. Okay, so this is just 1. It's fairly... let's go 2. Just gives us that little bit more room to play with. And now we're going to hang the sweater onto here. This is the good side. You can see, I guess you really can't see. Hang on. I'm going to show you that miter. So you see where the yarn is? Okay, let me see here. There's your miter. All the stitches are going inward and then they go outward. Okay, so now we're going to hang this sweater. Gotta find our... Okay. So, this is our yarn marker. This is also where we started, side 2. Okay, take them both. We're going to put them on number 1 to the right, which is where we actually have our other yarn marker. We're now going to take the edge the last point of the neckline of the front goes on 45 right. The last point on the other side of the front will go on 44 left, because we are at number 1 right. And then we are going to ease onto our sleeve here. I'm gonna say right about there. Yeah, right about here. It's about where we stopped 2 stitches. Okay, and we're going to pull it out. Now that fell off, that's normal. Put it back on. Drop the sweater so that it weighs itself down. And we start easing it on to the needles that we have chosen. I'm going to move my camera up so you can actually see what I'm doing. Oops, sorry. Okay, that should give you a pretty good idea. I try and grab at least 2 stitches. On that edge. When we're all done hanging the sweater front and one shoulder or sleeve, then what we're going to do is we're going to knit across once at tension 10, and then we're going to backstitch. So it's a very long process. This is a great time to weave in those ends, and then when we knit across for that one row, it's a little bit less work to do on the finish of the project. Diana Sullivan has you remove the neck or the mitered neckband on waist yarn. I have you put the mitered neckline on waist yarn before you even start. To me, it just makes more sense and is less work off the machine. I'll come back when this is all on. Okay, so now I'm going to weave in the last yarn tail from when we did the neckline on the front. Just one last thing, like I said several times, to deal with when we're all done. Okay, so now we're going to knit across, tension 10, one row. And now I get the honor of backstitching this whole thing. This is the end of the front and the first sleeve. Next will be the back and the second sleeve.